We're live, I think. Yep, live now. Hello, everyone. Really nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday evening. We are going to be talking to Sarah and Paul, who are two experienced primary school teachers that have pivoted into a bit more of a portfolio career. So a portfolio career, for those of you who don't know, is sort of multiple sort of roles that you have rather than one role within one organization. You might work for several different ones. Some of them might be voluntary, some of them might be paid. And the nice thing about this is you can sort of pick and choose what you like, what suits you, and work with organizations that you love or you value. They might help you upskill in certain areas. It might be just because you're genuinely passionate about it. And it's a nice way, it's a nice work-life balance. Quite often you can pick your own hours, your own time, and when you want to do things. So it's quite a nice one to pivot into. And what's great is we're going to hear both Sarah and Paul's stories today. They're going to let us know about their career in teaching, why they pivoted out, how they went about it, and hopefully give you some top tips. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll make a note of them and we'll answer those questions at the end. But thank you very much to Sarah and Paul for joining us this evening and for the Did Teach audience. Sarah, you're going to go first, aren't you? And tell us a bit about your career history and what you're up to now.
Okay, thanks, Katie. So hi, everybody. Yep, my name's Sarah. So my background was primary teaching. I taught in the classroom for 13 years. 12 of those years I was computing lead at the school that I worked with, and therefore I kind of had more of a passion for computing in school. The last few years of teaching, I don't know if anybody's heard of CAS, Computing at School, before. They are kind of local networks for computing leads to get together, and I started one of those in my school. At the time I was working part-time, and I wasn't looking to leave teaching necessarily, but because I was a part of CAS, there used to be newsletters that came out, emails, and on those emails there were job opportunities. And on one of those emails there was a job opportunity for working with the NCCE, the National Centre for Computing for Education, as that had just been created. So this was about 3.5-4 years ago, and there was a role in my area. Again, it looked as if it was part-time or maybe even less, like a day of work. So I just thought I can apply for that on top of what I'm doing. And I managed to get the role there for that. And then I kind of sidestepped after getting that role and seeing the opportunities that were out there. I then got more into kind of what I'm doing now. So really, for me, the NCCE was kind of the starting point of what I was doing. So in terms of what I did to start with, it was a computing consultant. I was within the East Midlands region at the time, and I would go into schools and support computing leads, helping them develop their computing curriculum. From that, I could then work with STEM Learning, delivering CPD courses. And then again, other opportunities arose from that with writing content for courses. So starting to do different things like that. So that's kind of where one of my roles came from. I looked at job adverts such as Indeed. I think that was one of the first places I started working for a VR company in my local area. So they had started to create content or wanted to get into education. They originally created content for houses. So kind of when you go look at a house, the virtual side of it. So they had all the tech and had created Egyptians and pyramids, but had no idea how to then create the worksheets to go with it. So I started kind of a little bit of work for them and moved into that. And that's kind of when I then left teaching, because I had enough work for what was going on. So from that, really my roles now are computing. So everything I do is based around primary computing. So with the NCCE, we now have computing hubs, and I support 2 of the computing hubs as primary leads. So I kind of have term time based roles now. Again, it's contracted via the contract that's set by the DFE. So it's not permanent, but it can be a 2-year contract and then a 3-year contract. So myself and Paul, when he speaks in a moment, have that work coming through. things such as the courses, the content writing, that's a little bit ad hoc, so it comes and go. It's not guaranteed work, but there is a lot of work out there for us. And then I've just started kind of looking around from, I'd say for me, social media is a really good place to have a look. Like I did teach, you find that you might see things on Twitter, you might see things on LinkedIn. Because I'm into computing, you follow relevant people, and then you may see different jobs that are coming up. So again, other roles I have is some of them I've just found by people who I follow sharing. So not necessarily a job advert that's advertised on a job centre website. It's more that somebody's put, oh, I'm hiring somebody for this role or this role, and kind of seeing roles that come that way. So that's kind of the basis of where I am at. So I'll let Paul jump in now, and if I've got anything else to add, I'll add that in after.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Katie. So yes, as you can see there, Sarah and I know each other quite well because we both work for the NCCE, and that's how we know each other. My story is I was a primary school teacher for just over 10 years. I wasn't the computing lead straight away because, interestingly, I've got a degree in history. So I was the history lead for about a year or so. And then I was the one person in the school who could help people with their computing. So it was very, very quickly the computing lead, and then was so for many, many years. But also had a passion for English as well, because that was what my PGC was in, with English. So I was always trying to grab that role if I could as well. So I'm a very passionate person about English and reading. And I think within my primary school career, I was, like a lot of us, trying to climb the ladder. I was the English lead, and then I was part of SLT. And a bit like Sarah, I must admit, I never really had any plans initially to leave teaching. I was, working up my way up the career ladder. And then I was starting to think about applying for being assistant head and deputy head. And I must admit, I applied to be a deputy head teacher at school, and I got accepted to go to the interview. But before the interview, I had Ofsted, and I just had not a bad experience for the school. The school got we had a good Ofsted, but my experience with Ofsted, I just kind of thought, I just don't want to do this anymore, And I think a lot of us had those Ofsted experiences where we just put so much time and effort into what we do, and it's just not good enough sometimes. I just thought, do I want to keep doing this? And then I was very, very fortunate in the sense that when I was computing lead, I was going to a lot of CPD courses here in Telford, where I am, and they were being run by a gentleman called Richard Smith, and he ran a company called Amazing ICT, and I used to go on a lot of his courses. And then just out of the blue, one day he turned around to me and he said, "Paul, I don't know why you come on my courses." And I thought, oh gosh, like what have I done? He said, you know more than I do. So we started laughing. And then he said, do you want to stay for lunch after one of the courses? And we got chatting. And he said, listen, in a fair few years' time, I'm about to hit 60. I'll be starting to think about retirement and passing on, my consultancy role. Would this be something that you would ever consider? And I must admit, like Sarah, I'd never really thought about leaving. I was just carrying on. And then after I had that Ofsted inspection, I started to, really, really rethink what I wanted to do. But I did love education. I loved working with children. I still do love working with children and, educating them and seeing the smiles on their faces with what we do with computing. And then I thought long and hard about it. And then I think, like a lot of us, we have a big trepidation about leaving teaching, don't we? Especially suddenly and full time, because, it is quite a secure job, isn't it? And, we don't get other jobs where we get almost 13 weeks holiday. So the thing that I did to try and test the waters was I went a little bit like Sarah. I went down to part-time, and I just went down and took one day off and didn't work on the Friday, and started to work with Richard at Amazing ICT. And then, a bit like Sarah said there, I started to mingle in those kind of computing circles. Started to meet other people, start to meet them even on social media through Twitter and LinkedIn. And I met a gentleman who had just started working with the NCCE, and he had seen me deliver a few courses at Amazing ICT. And he said, I think you'd be great doing some courses with STEM learning. So I said, oh yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that, And so I started doing some of the courses with STEM learning across computing. And then the role that me and Sarah both had at the NCC originally was, being a consultant in computing. And that's where I was put forward by this gentleman, and the same way Sarah had seen the job role, I think, through CAS. And then it is, like I say, it is contract based. So, really Sarah and I are self-employed. And I suppose if we're thinking about, every job's got pros and cons, hasn't it? But I think the nice thing about being self-employed is, to a certain extent, like Sarah said, and I think you said, Katie, at the start, you can choose who you want to work for to a certain degree. And not that I've ever come across it, but if you ever came across someone that you didn't really want to work for, or didn't really quite feel right, you can walk away instantly, which you can't normally do in a full-time job. And you've got that privilege to take a day off when you need to. You're going to someone's wedding, or it's the dentist, or taking the dogs to the vets. You run your own calendar, so you can take off days. It's your birthday, no worries, take a day off. It's absolutely fine. But at the same time, like Sarah said, it's contract based. So sometimes we'll get just one-off contract to write some resources for a content provider, like STEM Learning, or I think Sarah's done work for Kapow and things like that, haven't you? And then we get other contracts for a little bit longer, like 1 year, 2 year. But like Sarah said, I think at the moment we're in a very fortunate situation where the DFE is very conscious about improving computing in both primary and secondary. So there is a lot of work for us within computing, and it's opened up other doors for us within this. So it works, I think, for NASBTT as well, don't you, Sarah, and a bit of work for Kapow. And then I've started working for a lot of teaching school alliances, doing a lot of their computing, because they're starting to see the importance of that computing as well. But I think on top of that, you've got to also consider that, as being self-employed, you have to look after your own kind of finances. So you have to think about, well, when you earn some money, you have to think, well, how much do I put away for tax? And then you've got to do your tax return at the end of each year. And I'm a limited company, so I've got to think about corporation tax as well as my self-employed tax. And then I don't know if Sarah's got one, but I think an accountant is a very good thing to have. as you quickly find out, don't you, that actually it just takes a lot of stress and hassle away from sorting out your finances. And then on top of that, like I said before, I've got a huge passion for English, so it was always in the kind of back burner that I wanted to start up my own company as well. So I've started up a company called The Reading Corner, where we do a lot of English reading resources for primary schools, and we've been in a fortunate position to offer some teachers some jobs through that website. I think that's how you and I met, Katie, wasn't it? Because I advertised those jobs through your site, and we had a really good turnaround in numbers of people applying for the jobs. And like I was saying before we started this session today, I could have had everyone. They were really good, and everyone's got all these great skills in writing these resources, because you're doing it day in and day out. And that's, I guess, where we are right now, isn't it, Sarah? We're both self-employed. We've been doing it now. I think I've been self-employed now since part-time for about 6 years, part-time. And then I took the plunge full-time about 2 years ago, a little bit like Sarah, when we realized that we probably had enough work to leave, because like you say, it is a bit of a trepidation to think, do I want to leave a secure job and go into the uncertainty of where will the next paycheck come from, and also how much am I going to earn, month to month? And Sarah and I are on holiday, I suppose, now, like all teachers are, but we're not getting as paid as much as we normally are term time, because we work term time contracts, and we have to consider that within our role as well, don't we, as we work.
Yeah, I think that's, for me, the holiday side is perhaps hard, because when you've been a teacher for your whole working life, you enjoy having those holidays, especially if you've got children as well. It's the fact that, well, now I have to pay for them to have childcare if I'm working. It's an extra thing. So I don't work school holidays, but then equally I don't get paid in the school holiday. So like you're saving your tax money, you've got to think about, well, I'll put a bit away, because in the summer we've not got any money coming in, so it's, that side of thing can be a little bit, or you try and work extra hard June and July, so you've got that money coming in. It kind of swings. I think some work can be remote, which is good, so you don't always have to be working necessarily school hours, 9 till 3:30 as such, but you may be then working in the evenings as well, so it's kind of a little bit of both, isn't it? But yeah, if you're self-employed, you decide really, I suppose, on what your workload can look like. But I feel sometimes you maybe take on a little bit more because you don't always know where that next piece of work's coming from. So sometimes you're like juggling 3-4 balls in the air at once when you could have just had one thing going on.
Yeah. And how does that compare to teaching? Because obviously when you're teaching, it's very full on, isn't it? And you're doing a lot more hours. And like you say, if you've got Ofsted or other inspections or something else that's changing within the school, then each time you're sort of adding to the teacher workload. How does it compare now, that workload that you've got, even when you're taking on more work compared to being in a school?
So I think for me, the difference is, absolutely, we're used to a big workload in teaching, but the difference now is that even though we may have different jobs as such or different things happening, they're all to do with one subject. So it's kind of the same thing. It's just for different people, or, this might be for trainees and this one is for teachers, or this is for some SLT somewhere. So I think it's a little bit easier in that, you feel more confident in that particular area because you only need to know one thing. So I think that side is that, or if you're learning something new, that's okay, because that's probably going to become useful for something else as well. And the more teachers you talk to or people you support, you get extra ideas in, or that knowledge from other people. So I think, yes, it's the balancing, but as teachers, that's what we're used to anyway, isn't it? We're used to being in work for 7, sometimes, or 7:30, and running ragged all day, not getting a lunch, and so it's kind of, it's the same. It's just that you might be sat at home rather than being in a school environment for some of that.
Yeah. And just an interesting thing about what you say about lunch, like, do you always take a lunch break now, or is it a bit ad hoc the same?
No, I probably don't. I probably still don't take a lunch break, or I'll do a work and lunch, because I'm at home. I'll sit at my desk and I'll work. I think, like Sarah said, knowing that we have the holidays where we don't have the work, we do probably work quite hard during that term time. But like Sarah said, it's just one thing we've got to focus on. It's just computing, and I'm sure, like Sarah, we both enjoy it. It's a niche that we really enjoy, and we get satisfaction out of supporting the schools and helping them to develop their computing. And I still run workshops at Amazing ICT with the kids, so I get to work with the kids quite a lot during the week. So I could be in a school in the morning and do a whole morning workshop, then I'll rush home to the house and I'll let the dogs out and I'll have my half-hour lunch. I'll be back in the car and I'll be at another school. But at the same time, I don't have any marking, don't have any assessment, I haven't got any staff meetings, so I can come home sometimes at 3:15 and there's nothing on in the afternoon. Then my day is kind of done. But then other days could be, like Sarah said, it could be up at 7, it could be working all day with schools, and then we could have a course after school, or we're prepping for something big the next day, being in front of a big trust or something like that. So days are very eclectic in terms of very varied, very different, a bit like teaching, I suppose. So I wouldn't say the workload decreases too much, but I think it's workload that I enjoy. So I suppose that's the main thing, isn't it? And you haven't got all of the politics and paperwork that is probably one of the reasons why people do want to leave.
And I feel like, for me and Paul, we choose the workload because we are saying yes to things. If we can't do something, we could say no. Whereas perhaps in teaching, you're not necessarily choosing that workload, are you? Like September, that will tell you what your next workload is going to be like.
Absolutely.
We can choose that ourselves. We can say no.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Because I probably have turned a few things down where I've probably looked at my diary and gone, I can't physically do it, or it's not something I'm going to enjoy as much as doing the other things. So we can be a little bit picky and choosy when the work is there. It's all a balancing act, isn't it? You have to really look after yourself, don't you? Look after your diary, make sure you've got the right income coming in. But if someone was to say to me, would you change it? Would you go back? I'd say no. I'm very happy where I am, I quite like it's difficult sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, it can be difficult sometimes, the uncertainty, but I wouldn't change it. I really like the role that I've got, and I think if like Sarah said, you probably, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I always leave that open to work sign on, because you never know what work's going to come in. So I don't always need work, but sometimes you leave it on because you don't know who's going to approach you. And I think having a LinkedIn profile is quite useful if you do want to become self-employed, perhaps like this, where you're on contract basis, and do network with people. And like Sarah said before, we've sometimes done a few volunteer things. So I've done volunteer talks for companies or CAS, and just get your name out there, get your profile kind of increased, get your exposure, and then if people see you doing a good job, then they normally come and offer you some work sometimes. What I've noticed.
Yeah, I'd say that as well. The networking is important. Two things. For one, as you say, people can contact you. I've got quite a lot of work through people who I don't know, but who have heard me through other people. Or again, like even just myself and Paul, sometimes we can't do this day for whatever it is. Oh, well, can you do it? 'Cause, we know our skill set, so we can pass work on to each other. So kind of getting that network of people, and, social media is probably, to start with, the easiest way. If you're looking into it, starting to follow people in those circles and then see who they follow, and then start to kind of build that up collectively that way, I think is
I think having small conversations with people as well, that helps, doesn't it? Like Paul was saying, just having a chat with someone can lead to another job.
To people.
You don't know. And I think LinkedIn's a lovely place to do that. I found it really friendly, really welcoming. Have you two found the same thing, that when you reach out to people, they're genuinely quite interested in and want to connect?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. We've had many conversations, haven't we, with companies, and that's just been through LinkedIn, reaching out, saying, can we work with you? And I think you have to have that little bit of temerity about you to approach people and not be shy. And sometimes the saying is, you've got to go and get your work. Sometimes you've got to reach out for it rather than just waiting for it to come to you. Sometimes you have to be a little bit
I feel it sometimes can feel maybe a little bit like a sales role in a way, like you're trying to sell yourself, aren't you, if you needed to get that work in the first place. But you may be lucky enough to get something straight away and it's a permanent, and then you're
But I think it is soft selling, isn't it? It's, you think about in the classroom and you're selling your subject, or you're selling the idea of, like, we're all going to do an assembly this month and the whole class has to get involved. You're always kind of selling in school in a soft way. So I think, being brave and backing yourself and selling yourself to other people is a really good point. Someone's asking, actually, like, what's the, how do you get started with this sort of portfolio career? What's the first thing? What advice can you give to people if they're starting from scratch? They're teaching at the moment. What kind of things should they do?
Do you want to go on that one, Sarah?
I would say depends, exactly. For us too, we were very much like subject based. So if we're going for the theme as subject based, I would probably, reach out for curriculum hubs if those exist in your areas, those type of things. See what's happening in those areas. Is there any CPD courses that's going, or anything that you can be involved in? Is there any consultancy work for them? Start following people within that area as a starting point, and then it's very much just searching on LinkedIn has jobs on there, Indeed, those not just necessarily. I know for me, I'm based in Derbyshire, so I would always look on the Derbyshire County Council website, and then it wasn't until I started leaving teaching that I realized actually that is a very limited search of where jobs are. There's a lot more out there in places to be looking, really, to start with. Paul?
Yeah, I think find a niche that you want to go into as well. Like Sarah and I obviously picked computing. Maybe there's a certain niche that you want to go into if you are going to be self-employed or a consultant around a specific subject. Start to look and reach out and find what is already out there. I know a lot of people have had jobs through some of the maths companies or through Grammasaurus and all these kind of things. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to start up Reading Corner a little bit. I was saying to you before, wasn't I? I wanted to give people an opportunity to if they want to go down that route of being a content writer, they come do some work for me, and hopefully you can put that on your CV and just give you a helping hand in a start of perhaps going to work for somebody else or start on your own thing. And sometimes it is just, you sometimes stumble across things as well. Like sometimes I still meet people and I say I work for NCCE or, teach computer, and they still say, what's that? I've not heard of that, and sometimes you think, gosh, sometimes when these little bubbles, aren't we? Sometimes we forget people maybe haven't come across these. I meet head teachers who say, you're not using our scheme of work. I never knew it existed, kind of thing. So I think, like Sarah said, do have a good look around the socials. Twitter is a great CPD platform, isn't it? And so is LinkedIn. And then I think, like I said before, just have that little bit of temerity to reach out to people and just say, is there any work going? How do I get into that work? How do I get into those opportunities? That's the way sometimes it can open doors, like I said before, about networking and just getting your name out there. And I know one of our good friends down south, James Fraser, a lot of people might know him on Twitter, is Eat, Sleep, ICT, Repeat. He's doing the same thing now in September. He's gone down to 4 days at school. He's doing 1 day. He started his own consultancy business. He's got his name out there. A lot of people know him on Twitter now. And he started a following, and he's been going to a lot of these kind of meet and greets and doing volunteer work and getting his name out there. And it does take time. It's supposed to be like those content creators on YouTube and TikTok. It takes time to build up your profile and your portfolio and get your name out there as well. So just keep going sometimes as well. Keep going. Stay positive, because sometimes there can be, I wouldn't say dark days, the wrong way, but there can be days where you think, it can be sometimes a little bit lonely, because you work for yourself. So sometimes, I'll ring Sarah, Pam, Dale, and we'll have a little chat with Sarah and catch up and just kind of, socialize for 10 minutes, don't we, and see how we're getting on. So, just have a look around out there, be open to what's out there and search around. You'll probably come across things.
And the nice thing about teaching is you've always got that, haven't you? You've always got that in your back pocket, and you can drop down. Like Sarah, you were working part-time, weren't you? And you picked up some hours elsewhere. And Paul, you dropped down to 4 days, and you had that day where you focused on the other part of your career. So you can definitely do those sorts of things, or even go into supply if you can. If you don't want to be at a school full time with all the marking, you can do a bit of supply and start dipping your toe in the water and building it up from there. But I think this idea about following your passion and what you're genuinely interested in, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because if you're trawling websites and looking at this sort of stuff, you have to be genuinely interested in it, don't you? Have you ever got any work that you think is really dull and you didn't enjoy, but you did take it because you needed the money, or?
It's not really, no. And I think when you do find it, your niche and your passion, I think you work harder at it because you do enjoy it. And I think, like a lot of us, we got into teaching because we wanted to make a difference and work with children. And I still feel like, Sarah, I'm sure Sarah agrees, we still feel like we do that and we achieve that. And we get to work with teachers, which is great. And
I think
be at the forefront, isn't it?
Yeah, I think because, in our roles, we are still in schools a lot, either working with children or teachers, that we still feel maybe we're teachers in a way, because we still, I say to a lot of people, I'm just on a really big PPA inset day. I just don't necessarily do much of the teaching with the children, but I still, have all the other bits. And it's kind of, I think for the work that we do, we are still quite, even though we're not in school, we are quite school based, aren't we? We still see, we're not just at home all the time. We are out and about in classrooms and working with teachers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've got a nice compliment from Mary there. She was on your training session yesterday, Paul. What were you doing yesterday?
Yeah, we were running a computing course. It was an introduction to primary computing. We had a great turnout yesterday, and we had some really good teachers on there who, and this just goes to show our teachers are great. They're giving up a day in their holidays to come and sit on a full day with me. And it was nice yesterday, and I was thinking, we're not going to turn up. It's a nice day. The England women are in the semi-finals, but actually, everyone turned up and, you know, giving up their time to learn and develop their computer knowledge, you know, going into that next academic year, just shows the passion they've got for the subject and how they want to do well for the children. So yeah, hats off to I think Esther said something at the end, you know, hats off to you guys. You know, it's a great job to be in, and hats off to you for doing what you do, really.
Yeah, and I think, you know, those opportunities are going to be good for if anybody's going down a specific subject. If you want that extra CPD, because lots of things are online now, it may be that you can do things out of school hours to get that extra knowledge and whatever it is to then give you maybe that extra boost in confidence or whatever it is to help you kind of follow those roles later.
Yeah, I always think that when I speak to teachers and they look at job specifications, they're a bit worried about certain things within the job that they don't do within teaching. Quite often there's a big crossover. But one thing I think that's really important about teaching is we're continuously upskilling, aren't we? We're always developing. We've got a new initiative coming in that we need to address and we need to change. COVID, I mean, you know, how many teachers out there just pivoted everything that they did and put it online or made packs to send home? You know, it was like, it said a lot, and we can do that. We have that ability. So I think really be brave with yourself as well, and think, you know, if I can't do this, where can I get the training? Where can I, you know, attend a session or upskill myself? And actually you are better at it than you think you are. So yeah, definitely being brave. Yeah, anyone else got any more questions, please pop them in the chat. Sarah, I'd like to ask you, what do you think, what skills are you using from the classroom that you sort of really appreciate and you're using now in your current role?
Oh, that's a good question.
Time management still.
yeah, I think it's everything, you know, everything that you use, you are still using. So yeah, absolutely. Time management, being prepared, you know, lesson prep as such. Like yesterday, Paul did a course. So if we're running a course, we have to prep beforehand, having resources ready, you know, knowing, you know, and it's still the same as in the different types of the learners and what's going to be best, or is this remote, so how am I going to do it this way, or if it's face to face, how am I going to adapt the content that's there? So, you know, I think everything that we've done in the classroom or you do in the classroom is the same, and the on the go you know, being constant is another one.
Yeah, fantastic. And are there any things that you wish you kind of knew before you stepped out of the classroom, or you wish you'd kind of upskilled in or done slightly differently? Is there any sort of tips with hindsight, I guess, because everything flew quite nicely for you guys. Was there anything that you think, oh, if I had my time again, I would do this?
Probably get an accountant straight away. Because the tax is quite difficult, and you know, I think going, you know, taking it steady, you know, going down to, I went down to 4 days and then 3 days, and then I finally took the plunge, and I was, you know, secure in that way of being safe way of, rather than just stepping out of the classroom. You know, I thought about taking that time and taking those steps. So I would definitely have done that again. I wouldn't have just left. But in hindsight, I probably would have left a little bit earlier and done full time, because there was the opportunity. I think it's just that trepidation, isn't it? That, like I said before, you are leaving a secure job. So those are the two for me. I think it was quite nice that it was quite structured in going down and going part time, and then just getting an accountant to help out, because it is a lot of extra to manage in terms of your finances, to make sure that you've paid your tax, your national insurance, and all that on time.
Yeah, I think the other thing, you know, we were both lucky that we kind of fell into things, but I think it's if you have maybe only been in one school, because I know some of my friends now are looking for roles and they're like, you know, how have you got all this experience? So I think if you are in a school and you can't find anything now, just trying to do either a little bit more in your school, you know, so you've got extra things to write about, or can you network with other schools and lead a session for somebody, or do something, just so if you've only got a single experience that maybe you're an infant school, so you've never been in Key Stage 2, that might, for some certain roles, that might not be as good, or if you're in a trust, is there anything you can go to that's more of a, that type of thing may help. Obviously it depends on what your experiences is where you have now. Again, I was only in one school, I was just very lucky, but I think for a lot of people it might just be that extra experience could help sometimes, but again it would depend on the role, but it might help a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that does make a lot of sense. And I think, when I think about the secondary school students, they're applying to university, and we're sort of saying, well, what else are you doing? Not just the academic stuff, but what else are you doing to sort of bolster that interview to secure the place? And that's the same with us, isn't it? We can do other things. We can volunteer, we can upskill, we can do different courses, we can create a new initiative within our own school or the academy. I think that's a really important point, Sarah. Thank you. And we've got a question about contracts as well, and payments, and do you set a day rate? Do you quote for the work? How does that? And I guess it's different with different projects, is it?
Yeah, I'd say very much. Something like the STEM learning, for example, for us, that's a lot of them are set prices. This is what the day rate is. You say yes or no. So whatever it is, and again, it may be a day rate where you work for a full day, or it may then be hourly charges. So sometimes we have to send timesheets in hour by hour of what we've done to get that money. Other times it's 2 days a week for so long, there's no timesheets on that. Sometimes it may be that you give a price and they say yes or no. And again, if you've had work at a certain day rate, you kind of assume what that price is, and you say yes or no to what that is. So it's and again, as Paul says, with the accountant and different things, it can be hard if you've got lots of work, because then it's and just remembering to invoice. So at the end, you've worked really hard, and then the next one you think, I'm not even invoiced for that work, so I've got to send an invoice off, because when you're teaching, that's all just done, isn't it? You just get your money, and you've had a pension contribution, you've paid your tax, and this is what you've got left. And that it doesn't work that, and that can be time consuming. It can take you 5 hours to go through everything and put everything together and make sure you've invoiced everybody. And that's, so yeah, it's, it can be a very different on what that is. But, a lot of companies have, this is the price, you say yes or no to that price.
Yeah, and that's good. I think when you're teaching, you're just so used to doing that work for free almost, aren't you? If there's extra work in school to be done, you just take that on and roll with a new project, and not really even think about the time that you spend researching, creating, developing. Whereas for you guys, you have to think about all of those things, because that's money in your pocket, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, isn't it? And yeah, writing content can take a long time. If it's particular you don't know as much in, you've obviously got to research, or you haven't done work in that previously, it might take you 10 hours to research and get the ideas together for the 3 hours of making it. So yeah, and you've kind of got to factor that in. And myself and Paul have done that a few times, haven't we? We've learned from those experiences that some work is perhaps not good to take on, because it turns out you're getting paid £1 an hour once you've worked out what you've done. It sounded good to start with, but again, the more you do, the better you are at those types of things.
Yeah, and you learn from that, don't you? Sometimes I've been offered work at a rate, and I've turned it away, saying it doesn't reflect the amount of work we've got to do. And sometimes they'll come back with a better offer, or they'll try and find somebody else who will do the work for that price. So you have to kind of make those decisions, don't you, whether you want that work at that price, or you try and get a little bit more money, or try and be strict and say, well, this is how much I think is going to reflect the amount of work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've got to be fair to yourself, haven't you, at the end of the day, that you have got a degree, you have worked really hard as a teacher, you've built up this skill set, you are valuable, you're a valuable commodity, and not sell yourself short, really, and just sort of say, you do something for a minimum price. So yeah, have pride, I guess, in your ability as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Well, I'm trying to think if I've got any other questions. Anything that springs to mind for you two that you think would be interesting for our teachers to know?
Nothing else really springs to mind. No, I think we've covered most things, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's just finding that first. But again, yes, I know there's some people like, oh, it's very hard. But equally, moving from one school to another school is very hard now, isn't it? There's not always many teaching jobs out there. It's, it can be hard. It's just thinking a little bit different because it's not teaching, and teaching is very different to every other job that's out there. It's just thinking in a different way and like looking on different platforms and going out about things a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it is rewarding still, and you can have that work-life balance if you want that work-life balance. But equally, it can be lots of work and you can be working crazy and you think, oh, teaching was a lot easier in some months, but it's not a guarantee.
Just thinking about those platforms, I mean, I've used a few with Did Teach. There's certain things that I technically couldn't do, so I'd look on platforms like Upwork. Do you recommend those? Are you on them? Is that a good place to sort of put yourself up for work, or do you tend not to use them and work more with the sort of networking, the word of mouth?
I think for both of us, it's probably more networking and word of mouth, and that goes a long way. And try and keep it more personable. And sometimes you will get an email off someone saying, I attended one of your courses and I want to offer you this next role. So sometimes making sure you're doing a good job and staying professional. And I mean, a bit like when you're teaching, you're only as good as your last lesson. You're only as good as your last course you've done or your last consultancy work. But I find a lot of it is word of mouth. A lot of head teachers locally here will say, oh, we had Paul in, he was great, he did X, Y, and Z, and I think you should get him in. And then next minute I get a phone call or an email saying, this head's had you in, would you come in and do it? And you say, yeah, great. So I think it's about maintaining those high standards that we've all probably got as teachers anyway, because we're all very self-critical as teachers, aren't we? And yeah, I've never reached out on this kind of websites. It's just, I think network and word of mouth seems to work well
and
for
I
us.
think it depends. Like in our roles, we both haven't got a 5-day full-time role. It can be ad hoc. There's this work here, there's this work here. And I know there's a computing hub. I get emails in saying, I'm looking for work, I do this and this. But when I've contacted those people back, it's, oh, actually, I'm still teaching full time. So I can't come out and deliver a course, even if we had that availability for them, because they don't have that availability. So, it's hard. It might be for some people, well, you need to drop to at least 4 days and have that day available to start being able to offer. Because obviously, if it's with schools, it has to be within school time. If you're content writing, that's different. But if it's with schools, it needs to be within that time. And it might be, okay, well, if I haven't got work, I could do supply. But again, sometimes that's a little bit hard. If people are looking to do the step, then there's nothing we can, in terms of if, I've had that experience before, I've not been able to offer things to people because, actually, when they've then spoke to the head, they can't have any time out of the classroom to do anything. So, it's one of those acts, isn't it? What do I do? Do I drop to see if I get something, or do I wait to see if I, it's
but
it's a bit of a risk, isn't it? But
yeah, it can be. I mean, some of the people I've worked with, they've come out of school, but then the school have invoiced for the work. So that's sometimes a way to build your portfolio and your profile whilst you're still at school. To say, well, if you let me out of school for the day, the school can invoice and get the money that I would normally get. And and then a lot of heads, I think, quite like that sometimes, because you're sending out someone from a staff member from your school who's got a really good skill set, who's almost acting like an SLE or a consultant, or has got that skill set to go and help and support the teachers. So I think they quite like getting that exposure for their school. And that's sometimes a way. I know some of the people that we've met along the way on the NCCE have done that as well. So it could be that you want to approach your head teacher and offer that as an idea as well, maybe to help build that kind of CV up and that portfolio to apply for those kind of roles.
I hadn't thought of that. That's great.
But if there is anybody on here that's interested in computing or science, then it's called the Facilitator Development Program. So if you are wanting to deliver any courses from Full STEM Learning, the course is free to do, but obviously you need the time out of the classroom to be able to do that. It is not that you are then guaranteed work. It would then be contacting your local science hub, your computing hubs, and seeing if there is work available. You would need that qualification to be able to do that. But again, yeah, absolutely, it could be that way that Paul's saying, that then you are let out of school and that money comes into school to release you for those days to do that work.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, being open and honest and having those conversations, if you don't ask, you don't know, do you? So, the head might be very pleased to have someone like that on their team, and those skills that you develop from that, you can bring them back into the classroom as well, and, back into colleagues and inspire them a bit too. So, that sounds really interesting. Thank you. Someone's asking if you could repeat the name of the course, Sarah, that you just mentioned.
Yes, I'll see if I can find a link to what it is. It's the Facilitator Development Program. I'll just have a quick look now.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Yeah, and I think, there's lots of courses out there that people can do, aren't there, to upskill themselves. And there's free courses, there's paid courses, there's courses that you can get from sort of local councils, or so where did you look at any particular courses, Paul, other than the one Sarah's mentioning?
Well, that original course that Sarah I did a fair few years ago now was how we started, really, as well. So there is a really good starting platform to get your foot in the door, if that's something that you like. If you do like adults, adult teaching, teaching adults and working with teachers and supporting them. If you feel that you've got that sort of knowledge within computing or science, as Sarah mentioned, because it's all through STEM learning, and that could, or I've come across some people who maybe have got a penchant for computing, but never really gone down that route in terms of really focused on the subject and dedicated their time to it. I think you could still do that. Don't be sitting there thinking, well, I like computing, but I'm not great at it, or I couldn't talk to someone about networks properly. You probably could over the courses and a couple of years of you dedicating yourself to the subject and upskilling yourself through our courses or through your own research. So I think, don't ever think you can't do anything. Don't ever think that, like you said before, be that brave person and say that you can do it. And it does take that kind of self-belief, doesn't it? Sometimes just to say that, we can do this, because there's people I've met along the way who, said, oh, you'd be great at this. And they said, oh, no, I couldn't get up in front of adults. No, in front of kids, I can do it fine, but in front of adults, no. And I say, and people watch me be in front of adults and say, oh God, you're so good at it, Paul, you're so good at it. And I say, yeah, but one day I wasn't. There was one point where I wasn't. And you just get better at it. You get more accustomed to it. You learn from it. My first course I did, I was probably awful, but you learn from that, and you do get better as you get better at teaching, don't you? So don't put yourself down. Don't, Rome wasn't built in a day. Just keep going, stay positive, and believe in yourself. And I think Sarah's put the links into the chat there, hasn't she? So yeah, if you feel that could be something that you want to get into, then certainly go down that route.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic, and it's been really nice to hear how open and how positive you are about your changes from teaching and those skills that you've taken with you to this new career, and how your life's sort of reinterpreted through this, and really best of luck for the future, both of you. Are you happy if people contact you and try and connect with you on LinkedIn? Is that okay?
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I know my full name's not on the screen, so I'll put it in the chat if you want to try and find me on LinkedIn. That's absolutely cool. Yeah, and by all means, if we can help in any kind of way, I'm a part of quite a few Facebook groups where I see about people want to get out the classroom, and I know there's quite a few people who want to take that plunge. So I'm more than happy to help in any kind of way we can. Yeah, definitely.
It's really kind, really kind. Thank you, both of you. And just have a little read into portfolio careers in a bit more detail. If you've got some questions that you think Sarah and Paul will definitely be able to help you with, then connect with them on LinkedIn, fire over. Same to me as well. I'm Katie Stickley on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me and ask me some questions, and I can just give you some advice about people that I know who've switched careers and what they're doing and what companies they're working for, and how to go about it, that's absolutely fine as well. So it's been really, really lovely having you both. An absolute pleasure to hear your story. And thank you so much for giving up your time and giving advice to our audience. Very much appreciated.
Not a problem at all. Hope it helps.
Yeah.
Lovely. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.